welcome everyone. Really excited to host this session in relation to the entrepreneurship topic. We have two amazing guests and participants for this conversation. We'll get to that in a moment. I'm Juan Carlos Bilbao. I'm currently leading the Social Impact Lab for the Esade Center for Social Impacts. For those of you that don't know us, the Esade Center for Social Impact is an academic think tank that works toward a world where people and organizations better understand and solve complex global challenges. And we do so by developing research with rigor, reach, and relevance for and about social impact. And for this series, called the Impact Talk series, we're joining forces with Esade Careers in order to shape 4 sessions. This is the second one out of the 4 sessions about the impact space, and not only in Spain, but also in a global landscape, in which we feature inspiring speakers, such as the session that we have today from the field. This series provides or aims to provide insights into the social and environmental impact ecosystem, and helps people that are looking forward to join or explore the space to pursue a career path within the field and help you determine this personal fit. So without further ado, I would love to for both you, Maggie and Myriam, to briefly introduce yourself, like in a minute, about you, your current endeavors, and where you're connecting from.
Myriam, do you want to start? I'll go first. And hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. I'm Maggie De Pree. Thank you, Juan Carlos and Esade, for having us here today. I, amongst other things, am the co-founder of a global network called the League of Intrapreneurs. So for those of you that thought you were joining a call about entrepreneurship, starting up your own business, we're talking about starting up something new within an existing organization. So I've been kind of, I guess, singing about the importance of entrepreneurship for almost 20 or 25 years now, and really pleased to be here and talking about how important that work is and that impact pathway is, particularly in these times. So thanks for having me, and welcome, Myriam. Who are you?
Thank you very much, Maggie. You should know who I am. You've introduced me for years now, almost 15 years. So everyone, she does know who I am. I'm Myriam Sidibé. I'm the founder and chief mission officer of a B Corp called Brands on a Mission. And we basically help brands and companies accelerate their impact, social impact, and mainly in the health and well-being space. I have done, I'm an engineer by training, PhD in public health, and then I spent 15 years in Unilever in marketing. So having done my research on hand washing with soap, and you'll hear a lot more about this, I spent 15 years in the world's largest soap manufacturing. And I'm very excited to be here today. I'm based out of Nairobi. I've built a team that is now global, with global footprint. And we do work across the globe, across a variety of companies and brands. And I'll share a bit more of this later on. And I'm excited to be here. I've gone from entrepreneur to entrepreneur, so I am now, I'm no longer sheltered by the big corporations, cushions and salaries and all that, but that also comes with its own challenges. So I'm looking forward to showing and sharing how we bridge all of those together.
Love to hear more about it, Myriam and Maggie. And I've been looking forward for this session. I've been following with your work for the past, I believe, almost 10 years. So pretty excited to pick your brains and get to know all of your insights, lessons learned, also failures around this particular topic that has to do with intrapreneurship. So in order to help the audience to start with the same basis of understanding, we're gonna share you a quick video from the League of Intrapreneurs about what do we mean with intrapreneurship. So in a moment, you're gonna see the video.
All of us are feeling a void of leadership in the traditional sense. Leadership is not coming from our traditional institutions top down. It's coming from the bottom. It's coming from the middle up. And entrepreneurs represent a part of that new form of leadership. When people find a deep sense of purpose, they find a sense of agency, and they step into their power.
Unfortunately, there's still a lot of work to be done on this planet. It takes a lot of passion to continue to persevere.
Entrepreneurs are hard to find. We're tricky. We're not always very visible, and I think that's what makes this really exciting.
As soon as I started to hear about it, it really resonated with me. It's about you're in a situation where you're trying to create change, and you're also within a system. So you really need to understand how to navigate that system and create good things from it.
So the League brings together entrepreneurs from across sectors. So when we were looking at our objective to drive systems change on the Sustainable Development Goals, we realized that we needed not just the corporate entrepreneurs, but also the entrepreneurs in government and the entrepreneurs in the charitable sector.
Intrapreneurship is a concept that is evolving, that is defining itself as we do the things that we do.
Entrepreneurship is about affecting change from the inside, being part of an organization or a system and recognize there needs to be change and being that change agent.
To me, entrepreneurship is a tool where we bring people together to connect in very essential areas to create a more systemic and sustainable development for the future.
It's a beautiful bunch of humans who have this unusual combination of fire in the belly, brain power, and integrity.
Social intrapreneurs can be the door opener for a broader perspective within organizations.
They hear no and they think not yet or not now, but they keep forging ahead.
Entrepreneurship are the people who think entrepreneurially, who think slightly outside the box, outside their organizations.
This idea that there's a world out there that we might not even be able to fully imagine today, but if we commit ourselves to the work of building that, imagine like what that beautiful and complex journey might look like.
The opportunity is in finding the human connection and moving beyond institutions and transactions into deeply trusted relationships that are about impact and outcomes.
We have to figure out, to sense who can be our partners in entities that look completely different and unrelated, but turns out they hold the key to magical transformation. You can find them here in the League of Intrapreneurs.
Awesome video. And in that sense, you've been building the space, Maggie, for quite a long time, along with incubator, the accelerator programs, in relation to entrepreneurship, which I believe it's been a blind spot for quite some time. And you can achieve a huge and significant scale of impact, right? But most of us may consider a career on social entrepreneurship. So I love the change of narrative. I think that it's getting more into conversations and in different fields and topics, and what better to have an entrepreneur such as Myriam here. And before you were mentioning, Myriam, about your current endeavor in Brands on a Mission, but we'd love to get you back in time where you successfully navigated the corporate world for, I believe it was almost 2 decades, right? 20 years at Unilever. And in my opinion, I can recall the program, the campaign, the Lifebuoy Way, that has been one of the greatest social entrepreneurship cases that I know of, impacting, I believe, almost 1 billion of people. So I would love for you to share with the audience, what was it about? What was the impact? And specifically this like eureka moment, epiphany, in which you realized you were an entrepreneur.
Thank you very much. Look, my career was shaped by a lot of different beliefs that I've had growing up. Like, I grew up in a family of 8 workers, and I lived in over 20 countries, always wanting to help the most vulnerable. So the question that I was going to eventually find a way to drive impact was always something that I wanted to do. I grew up with, conversations every night in my household, thinking about social justice. So the fact that I would then end up doing an undergraduate in engineering transformed into a master's in water and waste and then a PhD in public health. I found that public health and well-being is the foundation of social justice. So for me to think about that was always a given, right? But I started my first job in Burundi. Burundi, I don't know how many of you know where Burundi is, but small African country that was being ravaged by civil war at the time. And I was building sanitation facilities in refugee camp. And it made me realize a lot of the challenges in development, as many of the facilities were not used because they didn't meet any of the local needs. They didn't seem to make any interest. And that's when I went back and I did my PhD in public health, focusing on behavior change and really trying to understand the motivation so that, those toilets we were building, those hand washing facilities we were building could actually end up being used. And my research brought me to Unilever, where I discovered the concept of consumer. And, I moved away from beneficiary to now consumers, where, that same African woman that was being called beneficiary by aid sector, and we were giving all this donor money to then go build toilets that she wasn't using or hand washing facility that she wasn't using. Now Unilever was spending all its resources, the smartest people they had, all this money to think about that same African woman, because she had 50 Kenya shilling in her pocket. And then she was deciding which brand of soap she was going to buy because she wanted a particular perfume or a different colors. And that's, when I went to present my findings on understanding the motivations of hand washing with soap, Unilever said, I'll give you a job. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is fabulous. Like, this concept of consumer was everything I ever wanted as a young woman, African woman, wanting to be a lot more in touch with my continent and figuring out how to create solution with people that didn't seem to, that people would want to choose to use, right? So at Unilever, I applied my public health knowledge in marketing. I worked on initiative. I created Global Hand Washing Day, the world's first, UN recognized day around hand washing with soap, which is now celebrated in 100 countries and 500 million people. Came up with the hand washing programs, the Schools of Five, that was done in 450 million people in 19 languages. And then, we set up this ambitious goal to get 1 billion people washing hands. And I think this really showed me that business was aligned with social impact and really drive transformative change. But when I think about what my Eureka moment really was, is that moment where I sat there and I said, oh my goodness, I have the power to be able to bring and inspire a 80 billion euro company to believe that they could save lives and that they could change the world with every bar of soap that they sell. And that for me was when I realized that businesses could scale social impact far more effectively than traditional aid work, and empowering consumers to improve their own lives because they had the most powerful thing at their disposal, the access to a consumer that had money in their pocket to spend. And that was absolutely fabulous to hear. So that was my Eureka moment.
Thanks for sharing it, Myriam, and I love what you shared with us. For me, it was just a game changer in terms of focusing on behavioral change. That I believe that was one of the key or main factors that made Lifebuoy such an amazing project that had also achieved the triple bottom line. And I was wondering now with this particular and inspiring example, Maggie, you have, over the past decade, you have worked with entrepreneurs all across the world, almost 20,000 entrepreneurs, as the story of Myriam. We have heard a bunch of stories as these that are changing the rules of industries with market-driven solutions, in which we prove the concept of business as a force of good, right? So the League of Intrapreneurs has been promoting this, let's sort of say, ethical hacker mindset, in which, of what I understand, means seeing a company, all of its resources, assets, as Myriam was perfectly portraying with the case of Unilever, in which you can tackle a social or environmental challenge to the business-oriented approach. So my question is, how can both, let's say, companies as well as individuals cultivate this spirit and create an enabling environment in order for, let's say, thousands of other mediums to emerge? And also considering that we're navigating a lot of complexities and challenges, not only within organizations, but also in the current operating context that we have.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Juan Carlos, and Myriam, thank you for sharing your story and that origin piece. I mean, I guess I'm conscious we'll probably have a lot of students or people thinking about job moves on the call. So maybe addressing that first question about the individual, you know, really looking at this question of how can I have impact, right? You know, through my day job. And for a lot of people, as you said, you know, in Esade in business school, there's so much energy around setting up your own thing, you know, enterprise competitions and writing your business plan. I mean, I took those classes at business school too, and they're hugely inspiring. And for some of you, that may be a natural next step is to start your own thing. But listening to Myriam, I mean, any startup would dream of reaching 500 million people, right? So you look at these incumbent institutions like Unilever's or a bank or what have you, and they have so much resource that if you can channel it, if you can, as you say, kind of hack it for ethical purposes, if you can find that way to align what you care about, what the business cares about, the scale potential is massive. So I always invite people to start with what they care about, you know. So as Myriam, you said, you know, so eloquently, you sat around I can just imagine you as a little girl around the dining room table with your family. You know, these conversations around social justice were very present for you. We all have those stories, right? There are our own stories about what we care about and where those values came from, and really connecting into that to start. But then it's okay, well, then how do I connect what I care about with what society needs, right? Like what really do they need? And then, you know, how do I connect it with what the company cares about? You know, this person, this organization that's writing my paycheck, you know, what's really their priority? And so, you know, I really love, Myriam, how you've talked over the years about not being ashamed to talk about profit. You know, we live in, for the most part, capitalist market systems, and that's a huge motivator for a lot of the people that we work for and we work with. But if you can channel that towards solving real world problems that need solving, that's like the dream, right? So really we think about those three circles as like, what do I care deeply about? What does society need? And what does my company care about? And it's that sweet spot in the middle of those three things that I'd invite all of you to be thinking about, either in your existing job or, you know, as you're looking for a new organization to work for. The second piece that you bring, Juan Carlos, I think is so important and something that we've been working on for the last, I'd say, kind of 6 or 7 years at the League. So initially with the League of Intrapreneurs, we were very focused on the individual. You know, we'd find a Myriam and she'd be struggling to, you know, scale something up and beating her head against the wall. You know, it's not for the faint of heart, which I'm sure cover later, but you know, so I was meeting all these entrepreneurs and realizing there's power in connection and them finding each other and having community. And so it was a lot about the individual change maker. What we've realized is that only goes so far if you don't work on the conditions in which these entrepreneurs are working. And so more recently, we've been working with executive teams to look at how do you create enabling conditions for your people, you know, to step up and make that change. And so I know that we don't have a ton of time tonight to go super deep on it, but, you know, some of the questions that we start asking these executive teams is like, you know, do your people have time to explore, right? Like time is precious and it's a commodity in these organizations. You're over meetinged, right? You go from meeting to meeting to meeting. If you go from meeting to meeting, where's the space to learn, explore, to find those sweet spots of innovation opportunity, right? Like if Myriam wasn't in the camps, like observing the women and you know, like that idea would not have come. So we need to look at how we're creating just space and time for people to explore and scan the horizon. Are we clear about what impact is most important to us as a company and communicating that to our people? So really, what do we value, and are we signaling that to our people and inviting them to help us solve those problems? And that's a lot about storytelling, right? So like, tell the story of Myriam and celebrate her. Some companies set up awards, which, you know, you can maybe say are superficial, but in my view, it says this is what we value. Right? When we give people awards and recognition, it says this, we want more of this, you know, so what do we value? What stories are we telling? And finally, I would say, are we creating space to connect our people, in particular our innovators and entrepreneurs, with others so that they can learn and really develop those change-making skills? And that's what the League of Intrapreneurs is fundamentally about, is creating those connections and those relationships so you can learn and be more impactful and effective in your work.
Thanks for sharing it, Maggie. And it makes me realize that there's quite a bunch of potential starting points, such as giving your employees some time to, you know, think through and explore and experiment, you know, and perhaps engage in unlikely conversations with unlikely allies that can make you see things from a different angle and perspective. And I'm wondering, and this is a question for both of you, now, for playing different roles in the field, but what are some patterns that you have seen from this past years in terms of what are the main challenges in order to foster this enabling environment? And I'm currently thinking about your journey, you know, which is super inspiring, and you share it in such a way in which I see the impact crystallize. But I almost sure that you faced a ton of challenges, and you got frustrated, and you were about to throw the towel and give up. So I would love to hear about those challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome those challenges. Myriam, and also Maggie, if you can also complement in terms of those large patterns that you see as things that may inhibit the entrepreneurship.
Maybe I'll start. I think there's so many challenges, and you know, I was listening to what Maggie was saying about these awards, and it was so funny because, you know, like those awards that were given, and I can't remember what they were, Unilever Heroes or whatever. And then you'd find that almost everybody that was getting these awards would then get fired eventually, like regularly, because they couldn't, HR still couldn't figure out what to do with them, right? I mean, like, you know, they're good, you know, somehow they're doing some interesting things, but it still doesn't align to the bottom line and what exactly it is that the brands was trying to do, and there was no career path for them. So I think one of the biggest things for an entrepreneur in an organization is not to be this pariah constantly, where you are neither here nor there. And and it's difficult because it takes such a toll on your personal self-esteem in terms of like, why am I not growing? Why am I not the next VP? Why am I not the next SVP? Yet I'm giving so much impact as far as we can tell. But you know, that is not, there is no career path written for people like that, right? If you are a PhD in public health that's sitting in marketing, and you're trying to drive this, yes, you end up being some sort of the guardian of the good of the organization by telling them how inspiring, and you're working against the grain constantly, but you are not, there's no career path dedicated for you. You make the people from the corporate social responsibility afraid because you're driving such impact. The people in marketing would not give you the full P&L to drive. So you are really in between all the time. And I think that you know, you until you realize what is your superpower, and your superpower, and somebody said that to me not too long ago, because I was just sitting in actually Paul Polman just said that, because he was we went to Davos, and we were in Davos together, this Davos 2025, and I did an event where I was looking at, my new mission now is on, you know, how investing in African girls is good business, and you know, how to mobilize the private sector to spend more resources and really have an approach around gender and around you know, young women and African girls, and the key question that ended up happening, and he said, this is, you know, this is the kind of a woman that is on a mission constantly, and her superpower is to bring people together that wouldn't normally think about working together. And I was like, oh, wow, I didn't think about it that way. But that is a superpower, because in a world of silos and a world where you either have to be saving lives or you have to be selling something, to be able to bring these two people together and tell them that it's not contradicting, and that there shouldn't be this moral power where people feel that, because they're there on impact, they are better than the people that are trying to actually build the company. And I think for me, that is something that is a big one, and something that you have to learn, you have to figure out what to do. And you have to constantly be self-driven and keep building and forge a path for yourself as an individual, but also sometimes way outside of even a company, because sometimes you do outgrow the company. You cannot stay in that company forever because there is no more path for you. And yet you've not finished giving to the world what the world needs to do, which is the reason why I transitioned at some point into academics and then into setting up my own company. I think for me, that's a really important one in terms of, challenges as an entrepreneur and what you're trying to drive.
Myriam, I love what you're bringing. And I literally was in a call with an entrepreneur yesterday who said this exact thing. He's been setting up all these incredible ventures. He's in his 40s. And he said, it's not an ego thing, but there's really, like, when I look up at the company, there's no natural place for me to go. And so, for anybody here that is working kind of more in the HR space, the question I often ask is, what is high potential? What are the skills that we're looking for in our leadership? And I mean, I would say entrepreneurship and 21st century leadership are synonymous, right? You need people that are scanning the horizon, that are making sense of complex systems, that are able to navigate uncertainty and almost embrace it, because look what's going on today. It's such an uncertain world, and so many people get frozen by uncertainty. Well, entrepreneurs step into the fog. And what Myriam was talking about, being able to bring people together across sectors, unlikely allies. So, you look at the list of competencies of an entrepreneur or a social or impact entrepreneur, and for me, that's just great leadership. So I think HR teams really need to get kind of with the program as they're looking at their talent, and creating those pathways for entrepreneurs really to progress. I think also, though, entrepreneurs don't always want those more, some of those jobs. They're not that interesting. But how do you make sure, your talent's not topping out and leaving when they're creating so much value for the organization? Other challenges, Juan Carlos, we could go on and on and on. So I don't know if you want to pick one particularly, but I thought that what Myriam brought is really relevant as we're talking about careers and pathways. It is really something to pay attention to. But I love, Myriam, you're now an entrepreneur setting up your business, and so just recognizing that nobody's doing the kind of lifetime career anymore. We're having many careers. And we also have seen entrepreneurs within the league and elsewhere, moving from sector to sector as well. So you might start at a private sector company working on food security and then kind of top out there in terms of where you feel you can have your impact, move to a nonprofit, then realize how important policy is for, and then move into government. So, or set up a social enterprise to really develop a new technology or innovation. So we see people moving around the system quite a lot. And in speaking, one of the entrepreneurs I met early on, she's now CEO of a global organization working to transform markets for clean cooking. And she talks about all those entrepreneurial skills that she developed when she was at BP and other organizations like WWF. She's completely applying now in her role as chief executive. So it does not mean you can't run the organization if you're an entrepreneur, but you might be moving around the system before you get there.
And to be honest, right, in terms of what is it that you want, because sometimes
Exactly.
I think the organization may not be what you want, and that sometimes you are very good at inspiration and inspiring and keeping people aligned and doing that. But I think it's about getting that. But this where you feel your fire is being lit. I think that's very important to keep this in the back of your mind as an entrepreneur, right? And I think that's the kind of conversation that I think will make with that you need to keep in mind. And for me, in order to do this, to really define how you help companies and brands and individuals really bridge the divide between what is said versus what is done. That is why I wrote the book, right? I took the time after Unilever in transition and said, look, after 15 years in Unilever, and I don't want this story to just disappear. I want to document it. I want to define a path that will enable you to then go and teach to more companies and more brands this story. Because if I then even stop and let's say go to the public sector and do that, this experience was so unique for 15 years. And it was so, I learned so much that I sat and I took 2 years, went to Harvard Kennedy School, sat at the Center for Business and Government and wrote my book, right? So that I defined that framework, I defined the pathway, and then I could say, this is what it looks like. And for that, it's called the Purpose Tree Framework. It's a very clear framework that you can guide companies and you can guide them on what to do. I'm using them obviously in my company, but it was also a very healing moment that I didn't just dream everything that I just went through for 15 years, that I developed and created a very unique discipline that I call marketing for public health, which is really being at the intersection of marketing and public health. And that I've done that on soap and I've done that on hand washing, but the truth is I could do this on reduction of harmful use of alcohol. I can do this with, sexual reproductive health and right with a condom brand. I can do this today on thinking about, what else that I can do this, for example, on menstrual poverty and, getting pads to be sold. I mean, all those examples exist, and that the framework and the learnings that I had done in one company and in one topic for 20 years was applicable across a variety. And I think it's really important when you are sitting there as the entrepreneur that you keep pushing the boundaries of where you are, because we are usually very good because we come in with like a cup full of motivations, of energy, of dedication. But then after a while, here you are, right? You get depleted. So you have to keep finding that motivation. And for me, I found that keeping one leg in academics, one leg in a variety of my world enabled me to keep my superpower.
Awesome. And now that you bring this up in terms of your new endeavor, and I love that you switch from being an intrapreneur to an entrepreneur. Let's say someone who feels passionate about a particular social or environmental challenge, just as when you're in your case, public health, right? But isn't sure whether to pursue or tackle that particular challenge through intrapreneurship within their current organization, or starting their own social venture. What could be an advice that you can give to that person?
I think it's harder when you go into entrepreneurship. It's different. It's not harder. It's just different. You don't have the cushion of a salary, right, and an income. You don't have the cushion of, you have to create. So there's a certain level of like, I have to deliver what I said I was going to deliver, and here are the projects, and you're searching for. So you have to create a backbone and a structure and all of that. Within an entrepreneur into a company, you at least have all those boundaries, and depending on the leadership, you can find an amazing leadership that will give you the space to be able to then blossom with that. When an entrepreneur, you're just on your own. If the client hasn't liked what you said, they just don't renew your contract, right? And then you're out of a job. So there goes entrepreneurship and all these other things, which is very different than when you are an entrepreneur. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think I'm enjoying, but it's hard. It's very, very hard, right? And you may not be paid to be the inspiration all the time. There's a limit to how many inspirations and motivations you can be. So you need to think about what is the business model and what will get you paid. And I think that the going back to that basic economics is very important. And the basic economics now, whereas I used to spend a lot of time on figuring out what was the business model for a big company like Unilever to keep driving hand washing with soap and then obviously give competitive advantage to the brand. Now it's all about what does that mean for me? What is the business model for Brands on a Mission and Myriam Sidibé in order to keep paying me, because I still have 3 kids and I still need resources and all the things that are required, right? So, you know, I mean, that's very basic, but it's really, really important. So, you know, does that mean that you water down some of your values around impact? No and yes. It's about figuring out how you monetize and you give something to the world. And unfortunately, you know, of course, that goalpost keeps changing every now and again.
Yeah, it's been pretty insightful, and something that comes to my mind, I don't know what, but is in relation to this, I believe it was an article by Harvard Business Review back from 8 years or so, which the title was "Catching Intrapreneurs Before They Leave," right? So in that sense, Maggie, what could be an advice or a suggestion, not only for a large company, because at some point, and someone from the audience is pointing it out, which I love, the aspect of also considering small and medium enterprises, not only large companies, but how might we catch entrepreneurs before they leave?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think, you know, a lot of what we spoke to, because we did this research and we asked entrepreneurs, right? Like what really helps them to stay. I think Myriam just really touched on it, right? Like what helps you keep connected to your fire and your flame? Because if you don't have that, this work is so difficult. You know, you're going to burn out, you know, and so I think part of it is that, you know, working above and beyond your day job is not sustainable. And I do think sometimes organizations feel that they talk about side of desk or side hustles, and we've kind of glorified that. And I'm sorry, like if you want to build a program like Myriam built at Unilever, she's doing that as a full-time job with a team of people. You know, it's not something you can do on the side of your desk. So I think if you don't want them to leave, you know, once the idea gets some traction, you know, so sure, you might need in the early stages to do it above and beyond, but at some point they actually need the time and resources to develop the project. And if they don't get that, I think, you know, there's very limited shelf life for either that idea or the entrepreneur attached to it. You know, open doors was something we heard a lot, like in an organizations, like, are people willing to listen to your ideas? Do you feel you can go to anybody at almost any level of the organization if you see an opportunity? You know, I remember this is just a very small example, but my cousin was a very junior designer in an ad agency for her first job, but she saw a way to do something better and she just went straight to the CEO. And he loved her for it, you know, and there were open doors, clearly, or she at least saw them as open. You know, sometimes it's about how we perceive things and not being afraid about, you know, the job titles. But, you know, are we creating those conditions for people to approach us when they see these opportunities? And it doesn't mean we can say yes to everything, right? Like we need to deliver on the fundamentals, we need to keep the business going, but that sense that like people are open and willing to listen to good ideas wherever they come from is hugely important. And then lastly, I would just say community connections, relationships, right? So we're seeing increasingly, and what the League's been involved in is developing networks of entrepreneurs within organizations. A great example was Google did this with their climate entrepreneurs. And so they now have it's like 10,000 people, I think, working within Google that are interested in climate. And a portion of those are actually developing out new initiatives. That was super grassroots, all started by employees. But once Google management got wind of it, and I'm, you know, not necessarily singing Google's praises across the board here, but in terms of this, they did really well to say, actually, there's value these people are creating for the company. They're solving a problem that we really care about. We're not going to shut this down. We're actually going to look at how we can support it. So, yeah, for sure, the network piece is really valuable for entrepreneurs and will help you keep them longer.
And thanks. And what about, for instance, medium-sized companies or even small-sized or academia? No, you can find entrepreneurs, you know, that untapped potential of innovation in benefit of the society and the environment. What could be a way to set up an entrepreneurship culture to start supporting them? Either you, Maggie,
I think most of what I've talked about applies to any size company. I mean, it's funny, I never saw myself as an entrepreneur because initially I defined it as like Unilever.
Yeah.
When I look back at my own work in my 40-person organization, actually doing this work on entrepreneurship, most people didn't get it. They didn't value it. There was like, why is Maggie spending all her time with these, you know, like crazy weirdos in the company? I mean, it was really
people.
She's like, what is she doing? You know, and so it was then when I realized that actually entrepreneurship exists anywhere, you know, that the system's like outmoded, you know, has outmoded thinking or bureaucracy. So that can be in a 10-person organization or a 40,000 person organization. And I think, you know, when I think about my own experience, it was just really similar. Like, did people, you know, were they willing to listen to good ideas, even if they seemed a bit radical? Did they give me some space? There was a lot of pressure to just, at that time, be at the desk, boots under the desk, you know, and I'm like, that's not how you come up with good ideas, relationships, solve problems, is you need to be out and connecting with other, you know, like-minded potential partners and what have you. So yeah, I would say this all totally applies. But again, it's a balance, you know, and Myriam, I love what you're bringing, you know, as an entrepreneur. All of a sudden it's like a real appreciation for what the chief exec and the exec team is dealing with on a scale, right? It's like, you know, we want them to invest in all our ideas. And so I think that's the other thing. We used to always, you know, there's a tendency sometimes to vilify, you know, the executive team. Oh, they don't get it, or they don't care about impact. It's like, they're holding a lot of pressure, right? To keep the lights on, to pay people's salaries, to deliver the goods, to do it safely. You know, if you're in a business that has food or health, you know, there's lives sometimes at stake. And so having a respect for what those decision makers are holding, and then looking at like, how can I bring my idea in a way that helps them, right? Rather than seeing this kind of clash.
I believe that we're almost about to end this session. It's been such a lovely conversation. I would love to host a second and a third session, just focus on this particular topic, and we have some room for questions from the audience. But before that, just a quick piece of advice for aspiring entrepreneurs from you, Myriam. If I'm, you know, heard this talk, I participated in this webinar, this spark it kickstarted within me, and I'm considering it. What could be like the step 1, 2, 3 to start becoming an entrepreneur? And also, if you can point some resources, tools, or assets. We know, Maggie, that there's a bunch of amazing, cool resources such as the Entrepreneur's Toolkit and the Compass. But what can you share in that sense, Myriam?
Yeah, no. So thank you very much, Juan Carlos. I think, you know, feeding your own purpose and keep refilling your cup is just so important. You know, I every now and again I have to pause and keep thinking. I believe that health and well-being is the foundation of social justice. Every now and again, when I stop and I'm not sure where I'm going and what exactly it is that I'm doing, you know, I go back to programs and I think about women's health, and I think about the work that I could do, whether it is fighting against Trump and really thinking about what you could do with you know, abortion and sexual rights of women in America being taken backwards, and you're thinking, oh bloody hell, that is going to have huge impact for millions of girls across the continent in Africa, right? You know, just keep thinking about the personal purpose that drives you, and it doesn't matter what that is, and keep nurturing that, because ultimately that is those, when everything is closed down and you're not sure what's going to happen, that's going to keep you going. I think that's really important. And so many times, you know, you have to keep building your own tribe, you know, your tribe of people that could be as eclectic as possible, but as long as they continue nurturing and helping you and believing in that for you, that's where you're going to keep driving that. And I think that's really important. I was going to say I have my book, right? So I hope all of you have a copy, or you figure out what to do. I think it's got my at least the introduction. I've got one chapter that's all about my story and personal stories and how I've built in, and the credit I give along the side to the company and to the various parts of the organizations and how I've learned and grown. You know, I would say get a copy of Brands on a Mission, because I think that's a really important you know, manual in terms of how you build and stay on your mission.
Thanks for sharing it, Myriam. And also, Maggie, I know you co-authored a book around entrepreneurship. We're sharing, I believe we're sharing the links, as well as one in Brands on a Mission. And let's see if there are any additional questions, because one of them I believe we just answered. Are there any tools or methodologies that can help professionals structure their entrepreneurial initiatives to gain traction within the company? And we just discussed both the compass, the toolkit, the framework that Myriam was sharing it. Also, if this suits small and medium enterprises, just a moment. I don't know if, Laura, you see any additional questions. Otherwise, we can wrap this up. Yeah, go ahead.
I have one question. Maybe it's already answered, but it's more of an admiration as well. How do you persevere? So I had some experiences in the past that I really was kind of pushed out of the organization. Like, oh, you're great. Oh, it's so nice what you're doing. And that's it. Like, no. So when is the trade-off? Like, how far? So I stepped up to the director. They also liked me, but there was no resources. So at some point I left indeed. But where is the balance? So is that really what you relate to keep reflecting? So is reflection the tool, or how do you keep your balance? Because it gives a lot of energy. You both have a lot of energy you have to have for this. So how do you keep saying?
Don't keep saying, that's the whole point.
Yeah, read Gibbs' book about that.
Exactly. Don't keep saying. What do you mean you keep saying? You don't keep saying, Laura. You just
okay.
agree that you're part of this insane movement. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It's not. It all depends on what is it that you want. And then Maggie's gonna do a better job because she has many other case studies. I can only reflect on me. And a couple of the people that I've worked with that we're genuine also entrepreneur, is that, you know, you have to, again, go back to what fills your cup, right? And for me, you know, obviously grounding myself in family, in kids, and then keep thinking about, okay, so then if I want to give my kids a different path, to tell them that things are, you know, you could be anything you want and you are this unicorn in these companies, you know, and it's fine. And there is a way forward, but it's not simple and it's not easy. And it's not, you know, it takes a huge toll on mental health. It takes a huge toll on just this big, you know, Maggie talked about opening doors to the CEO. I mean, like here I was with Paul Polman in Davos. And I was like, bloody hell, I can only imagine the number of like presidents within Unilever that have never made it to Davos, let alone host an event with Paul Polman. But here I was last week, you know, 2 weeks ago, you know, hosting a huge event at Gold's House with that. And it's, you know, and he was like, God, this girl is just like, you know, it's never ending, is it? Like she doesn't stop. Like there is a mission. She's constantly on a mission. I'm just saying, you have to find what keeps you going and what is the mission that you are on. And then you'll find a variety of ways to tackle it, to keep coming back to it. And then that's what you do. You find your purpose. But Maggie,
yeah, I mean,
thank you.
Yeah, listening to you, I mean, Laura, yeah, I can definitely empathize, and so many people in that experience, and Myriam, I would say, is a force as well. I mean, I don't think every journey has to look like Myriam's, you know. I think we can make change in our own way. I think, yeah, my impression, Myriam, is like you're you have the ability to deal with a lot of that. Like basically what happens is you come into a system and you try to change it, and there's just this blowback, right? There's this just force that comes against you. And so it's like, you know, can you withstand the force? So we talked about people when they're doing like business plans, also create a personal resilience plan, right? And so Myriam referenced her family and that like tribe of misfits and stuff like that, community, those outlets, you know, the yoga, like all those things that you do are hugely important for maintaining that resilience, because sometimes it can feel like you know, up against the system. And it's not that people in the system are bad people. It's just the infrastructure and the incentives are kind of misaligned. The other thing that I've heard a lot of entrepreneurs talk about that's given me some inspiration as I think about my own work is to remember who you're doing it for, right? So again, Myriam just said, I want to show that my kids that there's a different way, or like when you get on, you know, if you have to give a presentation in front of a group of executives and you're scared and nervous, you know, as a lot of us might be, or if you're trying to challenge a bit more than might be comfortable for you, remember, it's not about you, right? Or your ego. This is about the communities that you're trying to serve, right? And I think if you walk into that boardroom or that on that stage or into that challenging conversation and bring with you the thousands, the millions, or just the dozens, you know, whatever it is, but who are you doing this work for? That's not just about you, then I found that can be really, really powerful.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you, Myriam. Really insightful conversation that leaves room and leaves us with a lot of homework. No, first of all, think about our superpower. No, in this, as you will put it, in a world of silos, how can we untap this leadership aspect as intrapreneurship is, right? And develop this new set of skills and connect with that passion and that mission. Engage with unlikely allies and just go for it, right? So I really enjoyed the session. On behalf of the Esade Center for Social Impact and Esade Careers, I want to thank you. You have my most biggest respect and admiration for your work, and thanks for the inspiration and also the action points that you share with us. Thanks for being tonight in this series, Impact Up series.
Thanks, Juan Carlos. Thanks, Laura, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you
everyone,
all.
for joining us.
Bye-bye.